Good afternoon. We are excited to be here today with Dr. David Fajgenbaum, immunologist, assistant professor of medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, and the associate director of the Orphan Disease Center. I'm going to go on a little bit more with your bio, Dr. Fajgenbaum. You are the co-founder and executive director of the Castleman Disease Collaborative Network and the co-founder of the National Students of Ailing Mothers and Fathers Support Network. It's so excited to have you here. I know you've been profiled on many major media outlets, including the New York Times and Forbes, Science, Reader's Digest, and the Today Show. And so we're just honored and excited to have you here to have this conversation with us today. So welcome.
Oh,
welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you so much.
And with a bio like that, I'm not really even sure where to start. I mean, that's you've done so much in your life, and yet that doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what you've done and what you've been through. So, it's hard to know really even where to start with it all. So, we were hoping today to talk about a lot of different things. Today is Children's Grief Awareness Day, and one message we hope to spread today and always through Children's Grief Awareness Day is that you're not alone.
That's right.
When somebody in your life dies, you feel like you're the only one going through this. And in some ways you are, because the grief experience is so unique to you that you are the only one obviously going through your personal grief. But I know you lost a loved one as a young college student. And I was wondering if we could just start there with you sharing your story.
Sure, absolutely. So I learned just a couple weeks after I got to college that my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer, and of course was just devastated to learn of her diagnosis, and just struggled so much with learning that my best friend, my mom, was going to be so sick, and watching her illness. She battled brain cancer for 15 months. And throughout that time, I traveled back and forth between college and spending time with her, but really felt completely alone. As you said, it was this feeling that everyone else is a freshman at college and they're all having fun. And it's just, and I, not only was I not having fun, I felt guilty if I ever did have fun. If I ever smiled, I was like, how could I smile? My mom is back home getting chemotherapy. And just shortly before she passed away during my sophomore year, I promised her that I would start a group in her memory. My mom's name was Anne-Marie Fajgenbaum. Her initials were AMF, and I promised her that I would start something in her memory called AMF. I didn't know what AMF would stand for, but I wanted it to be a tribute to her for other college students like me. And she loved the idea. She couldn't say very many words at the time because of her brain cancer, but she said unconditional love. And for me, that was like the signal, like, I've got to do this. And she passed away a couple weeks later. When I went back to Georgetown, I started telling people, I just lost my mom to cancer. I'm going to start this group called AMF. And I was just completely shocked that as I told more and more people, even close friends of mine, even people living in the same dorm as me, what I had gone through, they said, oh, well, I just lost my mom last year, or my dad is sick right now. And I remember just being so surprised, like, wait a minute, we all were going through the exact same thing, but none of us knew the other people were going through it. So we all felt completely alone. And that really energized me to want to really grow AMF. And so we grew it at Georgetown, a peer support group for students to support one another. And then we decided to also channel our grief towards community service. So we started doing fundraising events for brain cancer, fundraising events for ALS in memory of a member, her father who had ALS. And so we decided we wanted to be about support and action. And as you can tell, as I talk about this, it's obviously something I'm so passionate about. And several years back, I wrote a book with Heather Servati-Sebb called We Get It. And it's all around this idea that, as you said, you want people who get it. And for me, my life kind of turned around when, or at least I wouldn't say it turned around. It started to get a little bit better when I went from feeling completely alone to understanding that there were other people out there who got it and who still get it. AMF is thankfully on college campuses around the country.
Thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm sorry, Terry.
That's all right. I know that's going to happen as we go through this. I'm pretty sure every time he talks, I'm going to have like 12 questions. But
go ahead. Why don't you go?
So I know we shared before we started this conversation that I got to see you present on some data that you collected, actually. I don't know, was that undergraduate work? I'm not sure what that was, right. Undergraduate work. And it was so compelling. I mean, how did you encourage others to share their stories? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah. So it was so interesting. I thought that it would be really hard to get people to want to share their perspectives, but I found that once you got a group of us in a room and you closed the door, then all of a sudden these stories just came out. I mean, in stories that we hadn't even told our closest friends in the world. Like, our closest friends didn't know these stories, but all of a sudden, when you're in a room with people who get it, who get what you're going through, all of a sudden you feel this connection and this ability to just share. And so that's really what AMF is and was all about, is students supporting students, grievers supporting grievers. And it was a matter of just getting people into a room. And so many people have these sort of things on their heart and on their minds. They want to get them out there, but they don't know where the safe space is. And that's something that you all provide so well, is a safe space to be able to share these feelings.
And I love you've reinforced the thought of peer support there, and really what this day is all about. And Children's Grief Awareness Day applies to young adults too. Making sure that all grievers realize that they're not alone in what they're experiencing, and it's so powerful. It's empowering. And to your point, I know I read one of your quotes, and I wrote down many things that you wrote in your book, Chasing My Cure. But one of the things you wrote, and I think was probably so powerful for you to share in that group setting, was that, and I'll read your quote. It says, "I was impaled by my mother's death." What a powerful, gut-wrenching statement. And I don't know if you remember, sure you remember writing that, but do you remember in that moment when you were able to share that with someone?
Absolutely. I think that, for so many of us dealing with grief and loss, sometimes there isn't a word to describe the pain. As I said before, I described my mom as being one of my best friends, and it was such a painful loss. And not only was it that I was losing someone I loved just kind of unconditionally and in ways that I can't describe, but it also turned my world upside down. I had this kind of belief in order and life and the way that things were supposed to happen. And here, was this incredible person who no one in the world deserves suffering. But I'm very biased, but I felt like if anyone didn't deserve it, it was this saint of a person in my mom. And so it just kind of threw a lot. It was more than just the loss of my mom. It was a loss of one of my best friends. It was also kind of the loss of structure in the universe for me. And I think that when all those things combine, that makes impaled. It may not even appropriately describe the pain from something like that.
I know that was probably taking you to a hard place, and so I really appreciate that you were open to talking about that. But it captured me in the moment as I read your book. I was like, wow, what a powerful word. So I appreciate you doing that. And I also didn't know, I've been supporting AMF and your work for a long time, but I didn't know that you had actually named AMF after your mom. So that was a learning from the book as well, and what a tribute to her.
Thank you so much. It's actually so early on. I told anyone and everyone that I would meet about AMF and about my mom and about the connection. And it was all over our website, because it was such for me, it was a way to kind of continue her legacy, because she was such a supporter when she was alive. She would have just loved AMF. But it's actually almost maybe even more special now that I hear about how AMF is helping people on campuses, and they don't even know that, they don't know the AMF connection. They don't know that my mom was the inspiration, but there's almost something more special for me, that it's like her legacy is continuing on, and I'm not a part of it. I'm not even aware of it. It just, for some reason, that almost touches me in a special way, that it's, that her legacy continues on.
Oh, that's fantastic. So heartwarming. And I love that. Thank you.
What a beautiful way to honor your mom and her legacy. in that
and
way.
she was such an understated person and such a humble person that just the fact that it's helping people is the number one thing. Whether anyone knows that AMF is her initials or she's the legacy behind it, that's not what it's about. She just was that kind of a person.
Well, we're appreciative of you sharing all of that. Thank you. Absolutely. So that was kind of the opener to the book and really, the core start of your story as you share it. And so your life took another turn after that.
That's right.
For a trajectory of a number of years that I can't even imagine what that looked like for you. Are you willing to share some of that journey with us as well?
Absolutely. So I went from being totally focused on supporting grieving college students in memory of my mom. I also promised her at the time that I wanted to go into medicine and I wanted to treat cancer patients like her. So Several years down the road, I was a third-year medical student at the University of Pennsylvania. I was still running AMF kind of on the side while in medical school. And out of nowhere, I became critically ill. My liver, my kidneys, my bone marrow, my heart, my lungs, they just all started shutting down. Mm-hmm. And I went from this, perfect state of health to literally being hospitalized in the intensive care unit at the same hospital that I had just weeks before been taking care of patients. And I required medical technology to keep me alive, all with no diagnosis. And so it was 11 weeks of critical condition, needing dialysis because my kidneys weren't working, needing daily transfusions to keep me alive, all before I was eventually diagnosed with a disease called idiopathic multicentric Castleman disease, which is this rare and deadly condition where your immune system attacks your vital organs. And right before the diagnosis was made, just a couple of days before, I was so sick that my doctors told my family that this was it and that they should say their goodbyes to me. And I, of course, don't remember very much of it, but we did say our goodbyes, and then I didn't think I would see them again. And they had a priest come in. I'm Catholic, and a priest came in to read my last rites to me. And again, I don't remember too much of it because I was so sick. But of course, that's typically it, right? You've said goodbye to your family. Priest comes in to read your last rites. I, unfortunately, from all of the wonderful people that I've worked with through AMF, know that usually you don't get a second chance. So this is it. Thankfully, the diagnosis came in just in time, and thankfully, I was given combination chemotherapy, these 7 different chemotherapies that destroyed my disease, that really started to move me in the right direction, and I survived that. Of course, you can imagine when you go through an experience like that, you learn a lot of life lessons. And that's actually one of the main reasons why I wrote Chasing My Cures, because I learned so much about life, lessons that I didn't know before I went through this that I felt like I had to share with the world. But for the first presentation, when I first got sick and had my last rites read to me, I think the biggest lesson that I learned at that time was something that sounds like a cliche, every make the most of every second is kind of a cliche, but what I like to talk about is overtime, and how having my last rites read to me has given me this sense of being in overtime. And I played football at Georgetown before I got sick, and so the sports metaphor really fits for me, and that's that in overtime every second counts, and any false or any misstep or mistake, the game's over. And there's a extra sense of urgency and importance to overtime that you don't get otherwise. And for me, I just feel like I've been thrust into this state of being in overtime, which sounds maybe terrible or frightening or scary, but actually it's been really clarifying for me. And it's really helped me to figure out where do I want to focus my time, because I do need to make the most of it. Unfortunately, I've gone on, and I went on to have many, many relapses, all of which were life-threatening and deadly. And so I wish my journey ended when the diagnosis was made and I got better with treatment. But unfortunately, I went on to have relapse after relapse after relapse.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned the overtime, and I don't want to steal your thunder as we get there, but I know what overtime you consider yourself in now. And so that was another really powerful piece of your story, and what you share in your book about that, and your thoughts around how very important it is to embrace that overtime moment.
Yes. Yeah, and there's another one that's related to it, and that's a motto I like to use called "Think it, do it," and it basically came from this realization that when I was on my deathbed and I had my last rites read to me, I didn't regret a single thing that I had done in my life. There wasn't a single thing where I said, "Man, I did this. I wish I hadn't done it." The things I regretted were the things I thought of doing and didn't do. It was the girl I'd been dating. We decided to take a break, and I wanted to fight for our relationship, but I said, you know what? We're 25 years old. We've got all the time in the world. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Let's just see what happens. And then there I was, just a few months later, dying in the intensive care unit, and realizing that I didn't have time. And so I said, okay, if I do get time, I'm not going to just think about doing something and then just let it pass by. If I think it, I'm going to do it. And I think that very much fits with the overtime concept.
Yeah, without question. I'm going to come back to that, I think, at the end of our interview, if that's okay, because I want to use that as a tie-in. But I do appreciate you sharing that. That's real powerful in a lot of different ways. So I want to talk about that a little bit later. Terese, did you want to pick up?
Sure. I mean, I actually wanted to just hang there for just a minute with Dr. Fajgenbaum, in that you talk about the importance of the comma. Yeah. And I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about that, because I think that's important to that whole concept.
Yeah, I love that you picked up on that. So yeah, it's think it, comma, do it, and it's there's not a period, there's no stopping, there's no pause, or maybe there's a pause, because yes, there's a pause, but it's an intentional pause to say, is it worth doing? And then go do it. And it's because I guess in the book, I try to, as I'm writing this book, I'm thinking to myself, I'm telling people, if you think it, just do it. I'm like, wait a minute. There are sometimes we have thoughts that maybe we shouldn't act on, right? You know,
Right.
Maybe it's not always the best thing to think it and then do it. But yes, there's a comma in there. So that comma is for you to say, is it the right thing to do? Okay, now go do it. Don't take too long of a pause in the middle, but also don't do things that that you maybe would talk yourself out of at a later stage.
Thanks for elaborating on that. I thought that was a great concept, because when I first read it, that's what I thought too. Like, wow, just go, just do it. And that's not what you're talking about there. So thanks, Terri. I hope that wasn't where you were going to wrap around at the end.
No, it wasn't.
Still your thunder there. So, boy, there's just so much about everything that you're talking about. You know, you've been through so much between the death of your mom and all of the illness, the challenges of the illness. And I know so many people who will be tuning in today to hear you speak. Well, they've been through a lot of rough patches in life as well. And, I'm just wondering if you could talk about, how you find meaning in the challenges of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that finding meaning in the middle of these really tough challenges is often very hard, especially, I talk about losing my mom and trying to understand how does that fit in a just world, and I think many people going through grief and loss have a hard time understanding how all this can fit together, the highs and the lows of life. Mm-hmm. I think that a couple things maybe I'll talk about. The first is maybe not something that you would expect, but something I've learned over the years is that humor and laughter can actually be really helpful during these really tough times. My mom, when she had her brain surgery, I remember we were so worried about if she was going to emerge from this brain surgery as the same person that went in. Mm-hmm. A, was she going to survive? And B, if she did, would it still be our mom? And I remember being so terrified as we waited in the waiting room for her. And then after the brain surgery, we went in to see her, and she used humor in I think the most beautiful way. And it was that at the time she had this bandage around her head because she'd just gone through this multi-hour surgery, and she had a bulb emerging from her head that was sucking fluid out from where the surgical wound was. And when we walked back to see her, she looked at my dad, my sisters, and I, and she pointed to her head and she said, "Chiquita Banana Lady." And we just burst into laughter because, she's making a joke. She kind of looked like the Chiquita Banana Lady with the wrap and with the bulb coming out.
That's amazing.
And that was like what we needed. You would think that like laughter and humor in the post-surgical ICU unit in the brain tumor center of a cancer center, like laughter is like the last thing that you may think you need when you're in that situation. But my mom taught me that actually it's okay to laugh at those moments. We certainly weren't taking it lighthearted. We weren't like, oh, this brain cancer thing. No, we were just laughing together with the people we loved. And so then you fast forward to my journey, and there were a number of moments where, again, you might say, how did you laugh then? But I think that laughter with the people you love can be so powerful. And you guys may remember the experience where I was confused as being my father's pregnant wife. A drunk guy on New Year's Eve saw me with my big belly because my liver and my kidneys had shut down. Mm-hmm. So I had this huge belly that made me look like I was about 9 months pregnant. And this drunk guy just assumed that I must be a pregnant woman. I was bald from chemo, and I had a mask on because my immune system was completely destroyed. And, I guess I looked like my dad's pregnant wife, which we burst into laughter, and we were crying. We were laughing so hard that this drunk guy thought that, that I was my dad's pregnant wife. And so I think humor is something that I've found to be so important during really tough times. And again, it's not to downplay the sadness or the importance of these really tough times, but it's laughing with the people you love. At least for us, has been so therapeutic. Another thing I would say, which is a direct lesson from AMF, is I talked earlier about supporting one another being the core tenet of AMF. We get it, supporting one another. But a secondary and almost equally important tenet was service to others. And that was getting involved in going to the children's hospital and working with kids dealing with cancer, or raising money for ALS or for brain cancer, but doing, channeling our grief towards action, not only because it was good for the recipient, not only was it good for the ALS research program or someone who will benefit from brain cancer research, but it also was good for us. It actually made us feel better. It was therapeutic for us to say, oh my gosh, I've lost my mom to brain cancer, but oh my gosh, I'm going to go out and I'm going to raise so much money for brain cancer that brain cancer is going to wish that it didn't affect my mom. And that was something that really was so powerful for us. And it's still so powerful. I mean, as you know, I spend my days and my nights and my weekends chasing after this disease, Castleman disease, with everything that I've got. And my book's called Chasing My Cure, but I think I really think we made a mistake. It should be Chasing Our Cures, because it really isn't about me chasing my cure. It's really about us doing this together for many other patients. And I think the last thing I would say to answer your question, so I talked about humor. I talked about the therapeutic benefit of taking action. And then I think the third one I'll mention is just that many of us hope for things during really tough times. We hope that our mom gets better from cancer. We hope that we emerge from COVID-19 at some point, a healthy and safe society. But I think what I learned along the way is that when we find ourselves hoping for something, when we find ourselves praying for something or wishing for something, that needs to cue us to then say, well, what can I do to get us closer to that thing that I'm hoping for? It can't just be, I'm going to hope for this thing and then wait. My experience is that sometimes if you hope for something and you wait, it happens. But oftentimes if you hope for something and you wait, in my experience, it doesn't happen. It only happens when we activate one another, when we start taking action, we start turning our hope into action. And so, when we have a loved one who has brain cancer, we may not be a part of identifying a drug that is going to save our loved one's life from brain cancer, but we certainly can get them to the nearest cancer center that's great for them. We can drive for 8 hours through the night to get to that cancer center. There are things that we can do and actions that we can take.
So hope is a verb.
Yes, I like that. I like that. An action verb.
Yeah, there we go.
So I wrote down a number of things from the book along those lines. I mean, you say hope is a choice and a force.
Yep. But it's not a superpower.
But it's not a superpower. And you also say hope should inspire action. But this one I love. It says passive hope gets in the way of action. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. So what I'm referring to there, and I think that a really good example of that is that when I was first diagnosed with idiopathic multicentric Castleman disease, I went out to Little Rock, Arkansas, where the world's expert for Castleman disease is. And that's the number. If you are diagnosed with a rare disease or a loved one's diagnosed with a rare disease, the best thing you can do is find out where's the world's expert and just get in your car and just start driving. And hopefully they're within a day, but it's worth the 24-hour drive if that's what it takes. Literally just go. So I did that, and that felt like sorry, I continue to get these calendar alerts, and I'm not sure how to get rid of them.
You are not alone.
We get it. The first thing is to go see the expert. And for me, I felt like that was what I needed to do. I needed to get to Little Rock. Now I'm in the hands of the expert. I can place my hope in Dr. Fritz Van Riet. But what I learned is that while that is one step, and certainly I was taking action, by feeling that I was kind of doing everything at that moment, by feeling like, okay, I've done everything I possibly can do, I can just put hope into my doctor, I actually was stopping short of other things that I could do. I could get involved in raising money and awareness for the Castleman Disease organization that existed. I could have been reaching out to other doctors. And then actually, I started doing that when I relapsed on the only drug in development. So my doctor, the world's expert, got me on this experimental drug. We were hopeful it was going to work for me. And then it didn't. And then I relapsed. And that's when I said, okay, I can't just hope that by being in the right place with the right doctor that everything's going to work out. I need to take action beyond that. I can't just get to Little Rock. While I'm in Little Rock, I need to start figuring out, who should Dr. Van Riet be collaborating with? What samples does he have that research could be done on them? Kind of continuing to go. And so that's one example. I think many of us have other examples where we hope for things, whether it's COVID related or other things in life. We're hoping for a lot of things. And a lot of these things feel like they're totally out of our reach. I think all of us are hoping that we or people we love are not infected with COVID. And actually, a lot of that is out of our reach. A lot of it depends on the geographies that we're in and a lot of things that are out of our reach. But there are some things that we do have control over. And so I think it's about anything we have control over, saying, okay, if I'm hoping for something, if I have even the slightest amount of control, what can I do to help get closer to that which I'm hoping for?
Oh, that's so inspirational. I mean, really, that's and a great reminder, I think, at this very difficult time,
Yes.
which not sure where I want to go right now in terms of, the turning hope into action is such a powerful piece of your book. And it also follows a lot of what we believe here too, and holding on to hope and, offering hope to others in so many different ways. And I think, there were a lot of parallels and a lot of things that we can draw for the population that we're serving as well. So that was very meaningful for me to read and hopefully to share with our viewers today, that your message is such a strong one as it relates to hope and what our grieving population is experiencing. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk a lot in the book about the different forms of hope. There's this one form of hope, which I call more like a passive hope. And that was when I was first hospitalized, or right before I was hospitalized, just a day before I was hospitalized in Little Rock. I met another patient, another young person like myself, who had spent almost an entire year in the intensive care unit. He had most of his intestines had to be resected because they had shut down. He had multiple strokes that affected his neurological function. But he was standing there in front of me, and he was maybe 90% of who he was before. And I could only have dreamed at that moment that I would be standing one day and 90% of who I was. And just seeing this other patient gave me so much hope. And I think that the parallel in the grief journey is that sometimes we learn about someone who's gone through a similar journey as ours. And as was mentioned at the beginning, every journey is different. All of our grief journeys are different. But if we learn about someone who has a similar grief journey as ours, who is maybe actively moving forward in a positive way, it gives us a feeling that, okay, I can do that too. And I think, again, this gets back to the we get it sense, but I think that there's something about, gaining hope or giving hope just from seeing that someone else has gone through a similar journey. They've walked the path that I'm walking down, and they're doing okay. Not that they're doing great. None of us dealing with grief and loss are ever doing great and superb. We're doing our best. And AMF, as we mentioned earlier, was Alien Mothers and Fathers. Now it's actively moving forward. We haven't moved forward. We're not past things. We're actively moving forward. And so I think that's sort of what I call passive hope. And I need a better word than passive hope, because passive has a negative connotation, but it's the kind of hope that you just get. It's almost maybe contagious hope. It's like seeing someone else, seeing that they're, that they can make it through. It's contagious. You can feel it, right? There's that kind of hope. And then there's the other kind of hope that I talk about a lot in the book, which is okay, maybe I've got some contagious hope from somewhere. Maybe I'm hoping for some outcome. But then you say, okay, I'm not going to stop at just hoping. I'm going to go do something about it. I'm going to go take action. And oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with our own health issues, sometimes we can't physically take the actions ourselves. When I was in the ICU or in the hospital, I couldn't do a lot. I couldn't do many things at all. But I could ask my sister or my fiance, can you guys start reaching out to these other hospitals I've been at? Can we start trying to consolidate medical data and records and samples? And it may seem like a little crazy that I was thinking about that, but I was hoping for a future. I wanted to get married to Caitlin, and I knew that the only way I could get married to Caitlin is if we could find a drug that could keep me alive. And the only way we could find a drug that keep me alive is if we get these researchers working together, if we get involved in driving forward the science. And so, I was hoping for a wedding date, to make it to our wedding date, and that was then driving my action.
And I think, not to sound cliche, but it takes a community, and it takes, one of the things I think is very strong in your message is about connection.
Yes.
You don't openly term it as that, but everything you talk about, I think, is about the connections that we have, whether, it's in support or collaboration or mind melds, brainstorms, whatever, but it's about those connections and making them, so those meaningful connections.
Yes. They provide almost a fuel for these sort of things. The connections with other people, we talked about contagiousness and connections. It's like, other people, the people that you love, they can give you hope. They can, give you that fuel to keep fighting. I mentioned that it was actually during my 5th deadly relapse of this condition that I was engaged to Caitlin, and I so badly, like I said, wanted to make it to our wedding day. But I didn't have this sort of like heroic dream that I was going to live many years beyond that. I just had this in front of me. I just wanted to make it to our wedding day. I wanted to be there with Caitlin. I wanted to try to not have too many reminders for her of, kind of the pain that I'd put her through and that maybe would put her through in the future. But I just wanted to make it to that day. And I think sometimes having something in the future that we're fighting for gives us an extra boost of fuel, especially when that thing in the future that we're fighting for involves people that we love.
Right.
And so in my case, that gave me the fuel and the energy I needed to find a treatment that's saving my life and that could then help me to make it to our wedding day. And now, now I've got a different, Caitlin is still certainly, one of the things that fuels me, but also now, as you may be aware, I have a 2-year-old daughter who gives me the fuel that I need to keep fighting for more and more solutions.
So exciting! Yes, I read that in the book too, and her picture is adorable. She's adorable.
She's my sweetheart.
Amelia, right?
Yeah,
that's right. And Amelia has my mom's initials. Her name's
Amelia.
I know. So
another legacy moment.
Yeah, she's the newest AMF, and it's extra special when you can do things like that, as you know, for people you love.
David, I wanted to follow up. You've been talking so much and so eloquently about hope and turning hope into action, and at the risk of getting a little heavier, I wonder if you have to have had many moments of despair, and I'm sure many of our viewers today have those moments too. What can you say about those moments of despair and how to get through them?
Yeah, they sometimes when you share stories like I am about my journey, sometimes you kind of gloss over the low points and you want to emphasize the high points. I think it's just kind of human nature.
Sure.
But you're right. For every one of these high moments, getting married and having Amelia and finding a drug that's saving my life, these sort of things, there was always an equivalent low point. And for me, I think that if you ask about how I was able to get through those and how other people can get through those, I just really think it's about connection. I think it's about having your loved ones with you. I mean, I just don't know how else I could have gotten through those really tough times. I certainly couldn't have done it on my own. I don't think I had the resilience or the strength to get through to my own. I think that in addition to the people that I love being there for me, so my dad, my sisters, Caitlin, the memory of my mom, providing a sense of support as well. Those things helped me so much. At the same time, I also would talk about how there were times when it's maybe almost okay to, or I think everyone knows it's always okay to have low points, but I think that, there were times where it was devastating to lose my mom. And I didn't think it was appropriate or necessary to try to kind of like get over it right away or to like not feel those feelings. Like it's okay to feel those feelings. So I guess what you're saying and what I'm saying are in line. It's not that like, how do you eliminate these bad feelings from your life? Because bad feelings are okay, but it's how do you actively move forward considering those feelings. And I think that's where, having the people that you love and even people you don't really even know yet, but have gone through similar situations, they can support you. I would mention one story that was a real low point for me. And, I wrote it in Chasing My Cure, but frankly, I don't talk about it very often because it is one of the lowest points in my life. And it's almost easier to type these things than it is to say them. But I do think it's important for this community that'll be watching this to hear some of these things because it's not just the highs, but there's also those lows. And I think for me, probably one of the lowest points in my life was about 11 weeks into my illness, right before I was diagnosed. And right before I had my last rites read to me, I knew that I wasn't going to survive. And everyone knew that I wasn't going to survive. The doctors knew, my family knew. It was kind of just a matter of a couple of days maybe. And with no diagnosis in sight, no treatments to consider, just this was it. And I was in so much pain. I didn't mention earlier, when my organs shut down, part of it, when your liver and your kidneys stop working, is you start getting fluid everywhere. And so fluid accumulates around your heart and your lungs, around your liver. And so when fluid appears in these places, it stretches the sacs around your vital organs in ways that create basically the sac around your heart doubles in size. The same thing around your lungs, and it creates almost like a knife-like pain that is constant, and it's just like being stabbed by like thousands of knives constantly for weeks, right? And so it's a miserable existence, terrible pain, incredible sadness, the loss of a future life, the kind of the grieving of the things I'll never have. Mm-hmm. And those really all culminated in me feeling like I didn't want to keep fighting, that this was it. And I don't want to fight for 2 more days of this. I would have fought for, to get better and to live a life beyond it. But am I going to really keep fighting for more days of suffering? And that culminated in about a 1 second long thought that is in many ways something that has kind of haunted me since then. But it was for 1 second, I thought to myself, maybe I should just give up. Maybe these next 2 days are not worth the pain and the suffering. And I even, there was a telephone cord next to my hospital bed, and it was 1 second, but for 1 second, I looked at that cord wondering if this was, if the best thing for me to do is to almost, to give up and to basically, contribute to taking my life, which is so painful to say. But within 1 second, I snapped out of it. I was like, not right now, not today, not in this universe. And I said, I'm going to start fighting. I'm going to keep fighting. And I'm going to keep fighting because even if it's 2 days, it's 2 days with my sister by my side, both of my sisters by my side, my dad by my side. It's another day where I might be able to see with my best friend. And so, I'm going to keep fighting. And of course, I get emotional thinking about it because, if I had given up, I would have thought I was giving up on 2 days, right? I would have thought I'm giving up on 2 days of pain and suffering. But what I would have been giving up on is 10 years of memories and time with the people that I love, and with Caitlin and with Amelia, and scientific progress that I've been able to be a part of. And so as painful as it is to share that story, I think it's important because I think so many of us at times want to give up during really tough times. I mean, that's normal and it's natural to want to give up during really painful times. But I'm certainly an example and here to say that I'm so glad I didn't give up. And I'm so glad that I've been fighting with everything that I've had, because I can look back and say that was the right thing to do.
My gosh, so I read that in your book and purposely didn't go there. And I am humbled that you shared that with us. And the perspective that you share about the time gained, because in that one split second, you made that choice to live. It's so, it brings tears to my eyes right now. It's so powerful and so inspirational for so many people to hear and have that understanding. I really thank you for that.
I will jump onto that to say thank you for normalizing that for many people, for speaking to it, for giving it the voice that many of us swallow. Many of us have those times of despair. And, it takes a lot to be able to speak those out loud, and yet they're so normal. And, you just, in allowing yourself to be vulnerable with this audience, help normalize that for a lot of people. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. You guys create a safe space to be able to hear this sort of stuff.
Thank you. So I'm sad to say personally that our time is almost up, and I want to be making sure we're honoring your time. Before I pass it back to Terese to close out, I just want to say, and a couple of friends, one, I want to go back. I absolutely love that you talk about this is your 5th overtime. And I find that so inspirational, and, putting it out there for people to, take a look at that and embrace it. And I think the message is so powerful. So thank you for sharing that. The second thing, and I shared this with Terese earlier, I said, after I read that you're a mantra guy, I feel like you're a mantra guy, and you really come up with something and you're like, I'm living by that. And when you did your, think it, do it with that comma, it really spoke to me about the time that you gave us today. And again, so humbled that you would do so. And so I just personally want to thank you for doing that and finding that this hour was special enough to bring to our audience, and your time is so very valuable. And we know that, for goodness sakes, you're working on COVID cures along with everything else. So thank you for taking the time very personally. I want to thank you for that.
Oh, that means so much to me.
I'm going to live by that, think it, do it, and make it happen too with that comma. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That means so much to me. It's been so special for me to be a part of this with you all, and to be able to speak to something that's so personally important to me around young adult and children's bereavement, and supporting one another, being there for one another, and then to also be able to share my own personal journey. Because when I was the loved one of my mom while she went through cancer, I had certain expectations and thoughts about how I could be there for her or what she was going through. And a lot of those changed when I became the patient. I think that being able to, having the opportunity to share with viewers for this around some of my perspectives as the patient, that it's okay to laugh, and it's okay to, and in fact, it's something that sometimes some of us welcome. And I think there's some things that I think are so important to share with grievers, because these are not easy conversations to have with our loved ones that are sick or of course, that are dying. And so being able to share these perspectives today is really special. And you mentioned the fifth overtime, and so I should share the exact update, and that today marks 83.19 months since my last relapse.
Wow.
And I say 83.19 months, so we're more than 6.5 years, but I will never say that we're almost 7, because I know that I can't round up. I don't know if I'm going to make it to 84 months in remission on this drug. But I also don't round down, because we fought really, really hard for every fraction of every month of remission. For me, I'm on a drug based on research that I did that's saving my life, and that drug's helping other patients, but it's not helping all patients. And so there's more work to be done. It's that fraction, right? We're going to take the credit for the 0.19, but we've got work to do. And so, yes, I focus my days and my nights and my weekends and my life on searching for cures, but I can't think of a better excuse to take an hour out of the science to spend with you guys than today.
Well, thank you, and highly recommend the book. I'll put my little plug in, Chasing My Cure. So
agreed, great, wonderful book.
It is a wonderful book, and congratulations on the national best-selling title. Your work is amazing and inspiring, and I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And I'll just end by saying thank you for that last little nugget again, that you can't round up, I think we'll close on that, to, make what you can of every moment and every day.
You can't round up, but don't round down.
That's right.
We got to appreciate and reflect on and be thankful for each fraction.
There you go. Dr. Fajgenbaum, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so very much.